Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gay's Call 2.0 with your hosts, me, Marla, and Brad. So today, I just recently read one of Brad's new articles about his daughter asking him about the world and was quite interested to hear your explanation about what you wrote about this great fourth turning. I only know about the Great Turning from Joanna Macy's Great Turning. For those of you who don't know what that is, Joanna Macy talked about three scenarios. One was that we have business as usual, which is kind of what we're doing, where the Earth stays at 2 to 3 degrees in temperature rise, and things kind of stay how they are. There's also the great unraveling, which is where we hit 4 to 6 degrees of temperature rise, which is going to be, I think, horrible, considering the climate change that's happening now. Um, and that's the great unraveling when we really do nothing and have absolutely nothing in place in terms of climate control. Either we don't address the ecological crisis at all. And then she has the third scenario, which is one I hope that we get to, which is called the Great Turning, which is when we keep to the Paris Agreement of 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees increase in temperature, and we move towards this idea of a symbiocene, where all humans live in harmony and symbiosis with the planet. So that's kind of what I had in mind, but I don't really know what the great fourth turning is. So over to you, Brad. Explain.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I did want to include a couple of things. One is um, there's some type of mechanical noise out my window. I don't know if you can hear it or not. If so, please just include it. And I've got some notes up above here, so I'll be doing kind of a little bit of this. So please include that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, this came out of, I was really impressed with my daughter who's in her 30s. Um, this perspective that she's been trying to kind of stand back a little bit, not get so enmeshed in the day-to-day doom scrolling and all that. And at the same time that she was sharing this with me, I was in the process of reading a book about being in the fourth turning. And I had had some connection with and learned some about the four parts of the four turnings itself. And this is from two historians, William Strauss and Neil Howe. Um, they have kind of observed that over the past several centuries, societies, particularly those societies here in the West, tend to move through a series of cycles. And this whole series takes about anywhere from 80 to 100 years. So roughly the length of somebody, with a long human life. And so they call these cycles turnings. And each one reflects kind of a different mood or set of values and way of being in the world. Another way of kind of thinking of this is thinking of history, these being historical seasons. Like a season doesn't, end at one point and start another. I mean, we do in the calendar, it looks that way, but it's kind of, the calendar settings are a little bit artificial, but we do tend to go through, a spring, a summer, a fall, and a winter. So that's kind of the way to look at, how history works. And, um, I'm just going to very quickly go through what the four seasons are, or turnings. The first turning is kind of the high. You can consider it the spring of history. This is a time of rebuilding and renewing, and something that's following a major crisis. So after a crisis comes this first turning of renewal and a sense of purpose, and people are passionate about that. Then the second turning, you think again more of it kind of like the summer, is kind of a period of awakening. This is when people start to push back against the structures that kind of created the high to begin with. As kind of both a cultural and a spiritual awakening. And then as we proceed through that, and again, remembering these are roughly anywhere from 10 to 20, 25 years each, The third turning is a period of, you could say, unraveling. You know, the pendulum is beginning to swing further away from that period of spring-like. Institutions begin to weaken, start to have a decline in trust, exactly, like that. And then the fourth turning, which by the way is what we're in right now, is when a period of upheaval where multiple systems begin to break down. There's a ecological, economic, political, and cultural, everything's kind of breaking down at the same time. Um, Old ways of being are no longer working. I'm going through this part a little bit more in detail because um, I think if you look at it from this historical perspective, we are in the fourth turning, where things are breaking down, and it feels very chaotic and frightening and very uncertain. But if you step back and you look at this from, okay, this is a cycle, and it has repeated before. In other words, we've been in a period of the fourth turning before, historically. Um, think about World War II was one of those great fourth turnings, going back to the period of the First World War, and the Depression was a period of part of that, fourth turning, going back even further to, the revolutionary period here in the United States. So if we look at it from this, it kind of say, well, wait a minute, we've been here before. Maybe this isn't the end all be all. Maybe there is something that we can move through here as well. So this period of the fourth turning isn't just collapse.
Yeah.
It's a period of transformation itself. So that's the approach that when I look at it from this perspective, gives me a little bit more freedom to be with what's happening. Excuse me, be with what's happening without giving up or being completely resigned to it,
Yeah.
and still being able to grieve about it, but not be stopped by it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm being attacked by a fly. So keep doing this. But I wanted to quote something from Ursula K. Le Guin. She wrote this: "We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art, and very often in our art, the art of words." I mean, so for me, and I think for both of us actually, because we're both writers, it's so important that, the way that we speak about these things show that, if we keep talking about this doom and gloom and depression and that we're all just, that's it, it's all over, then it kind of starts to become a perception and a habit and a behavior, and people, yeah, they start to give up, right? Whereas you think about it in terms of I think in our last episode we talked about this idea of a wake-up call. Like, what should we be doing with our lives, and how do we now realize how bad this could get, and instead, use that as a almost like a catapult to do something better with, rather than a hole, to go up instead of just dig 6 feet and sit in there.
Yeah.
So I think everything that is happening is also very much based on social constructs. Like, we've made this up, right? Technically, they don't exist. And at some point, somebody overthrew the systems, and we've seen that happen in history for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so we can do it again. Not calling for anarchy and revolution, but peaceful protests.
Yeah,
Through
exactly.
art and words and community and reciprocity and nice things.
Yeah. Yeah, and to connect this back to my own work with the one cause and the four great untruths,
Yeah.
you know, um, right now, those four great untruths, that we are not connected, that more is always better, that we live on an infinite, planet with infinite resources, and don't worry, technology will will save us. That's what kind of is dominating during this period of unraveling and crisis.
Yeah.
And the four great truths of really living and realizing that we are all interconnected,
Yeah.
and we are connected inextricably to the web of life.
Yep.
That we have sufficient amount when we remember how to share.
Yeah.
And I think about that great truth, how billionaires are like financial hoarders. They're hoarding this energy of money and the power of money for what?
Yeah.
So that's part of what we're in the midst of dealing with.
Mhm.
And to really realize, wow, there's plenty for all when we remember how to share.
Yeah.
And then the whole notion that, we are, if we're living from the basic law of nature, of reciprocity,
Yeah.
that it's all about both giving and receiving in balance with nature itself. And that we, as human beings, are, as part of nature, we are here to be stewards of life,
Right.
not destroyers of life itself. So that's one of the places I try to keep bringing myself back to, those four, again, as I have named them, the four great truths, as a way of being, to allow myself to move through with some sense of peace and sanity
Yeah.
through this fourth turning period itself.
Yeah.
And we've got about 2 minutes
Yeah.
before we get cut off. So let's
I
see what
just
we can do
wanted
to
to, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we have 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to add, like, I think also because when you mentioned about the billionaires, like, it's really not it's really then becomes a game of us versus them, right? We start othering and be like, oh, these are bad and these are good. But there's a model called the Berkana two loops model, which kind of looks like this. I don't know if you can see me. But there are two loops happening at the same time. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is really not to overthrow a system and just be like us versus them, because then we end up into the same mess again. What we really want to do is to get enough people talking about a better future narrative, right? A more planet-centric, eco-centric, community, reciprocity, all these kinds of values, and have enough people believe in this better future narrative where they're almost parallel, they can exist at the same time,
Mm.
until enough people believe in this second way of being that we pass the social tipping point, right? We literally pass this mass of percentage where this becomes normal, and it's not such a woo-woo crazy kind of way of living. It really just becomes life. And so yeah, I think it's also important to say, like, that we're not trying to other people. We're just trying to get people to start thinking a bit more consciously about how we're living on this earth.
Very good. And with that, it's going to be a wrap for a short one today, but we will continue this conversation and doing what we can to shift the narrative
Yeah.
as you were pointing to today.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Talk to you soon. Take care.